Okay, so it's 12:02 and it's pretty hot out here, so I think we're going to get started. Again, want to thank our friends from the media who are here today. Want to thank Senator Welch and Tiffany, Dina Bitton, who's here from the United States Student Association, just to talk about really an important issue. And again, I want to begin by just sort of, making sure people notice this chart, which shows the default rate that's happening right now to student loan borrowers all across the country, and really the almost frightening trajectory that it's on right now, that's almost straight vertical. Again, that little red box that is on the chart was basically put in terms of April's numbers. So we already still have about 2 or 3 months of new defaults, which every student loan expert out there knows is that those numbers are going up, not down. And so this issue, when we talk about affordability for Americans, which is obviously uppermost in terms of people's minds, really has to be, if not added to the list, but almost pushed pretty darn close to the top of the list, because that's about 9 million student loan borrowers there out of the 42 million nationally. Again, we're in uncharted territory in terms of the numbers of people in default, and as I said, the trajectory is not encouraging at all. That's right. But in terms of affordability, if you're in default of a student of a loan obligation, really of almost any sort, it just absolutely crushes your credit rating, and really, just will handcuff particularly young Americans who, again, are at a critical point in their lives in terms of starting a career, starting a family, maybe buying a home. I mean, you name it. And being in default, as anyone knows who's been sort of exposed to that, is really tough stuff. So it's time really that this issue, as I said, be added and highlighted in terms of the issue of affordability. And that we really, I think, need to come up with some new, fresh ideas in terms of ways to, make sure that this group of legacy student loan borrowers get critical help, but also new student loan borrowers. So if you look forward to this fall, undergraduates are going to be paying 6.5% under the existing Stafford student loan formula, which is the 10% Treasury notes plus 2 points. And that, again, was already calculated for this coming academic year. And so that's 6.5%. Undergraduates pay the lowest rates. Graduate students pay even higher, and Parent Plus pays even higher than graduate students. So, we, again, not only in terms of defaults, but also in terms of interest rates, are at a place where we're really at record levels. And as I said, it's time to come up with a different approach. Peter Welch, Senator Welch, who's here, and former colleague from the House, and I introduced bicameral legislation to really, again, reset this issue, to sort of raise fundamental questions by proposing to eliminate student loan interest across the board for legacy borrowers who are in that chart, but also for new students who, again, are matriculating at colleges and universities all across the country. It's important to remember that student loan interest is paid directly into the United States Treasury. It is actually a windfall for the federal government because you're paying, obviously, on top of principal balance when you make those monthly payments. And, again, I think for a lot of people, there's a sort of threshold question is why are people who again are pretty critical moments in their lives, struggling economically, actually paying into a windfall for the federal government. And number two, the question is just if we're trying to sort of reset the program, we should at least start there, where interest is eliminated from the system. As we have heard from constituents year in and year out, the frightening aspect about interest is that if you're in a student loan repayment program where interest is suspended, that interest doesn't go away in terms of the loan balance that people own. And in fact, it capitalizes. So you have situations, and we have letters from constituents in Eastern Connecticut, where they actually owe more on interest than they do on the principal balance. and that by the time that they're really getting, where they're in their 50s, sometimes 60s, they're realizing they're almost hopelessly trapped in a system that, again, because of interest recapitalization, is really, as I said, just turning this program into really almost a monster financially for people. So our bill would eliminate the student loan interest. It would apply to people who are paying today to allow them to refinance down their loans. It certainly would apply also to new students. That has always been an issue that we've had to struggle with in the past about cutting interest rates, and we passed a bill, the the College Cost Reduction Act, back in 2007 when we were freshmen. There's an offset, there's a pay for that you have to deal with. Our bill addresses that point by setting up a system at the Department of Education or the Department of Treasury, who's ever in charge, where those principal balance payments would go into a trust fund. They would be invested in very low risk assets, and the income that generates would be there to again offset the costs of again eliminating interest as a revenue source for the federal treasury. This is a program that is used by the federal government for the Railroad Retirement Fund, believe it or not. And again, it uses the same mechanism of creating a trust fund at the Department of Treasury, investing it in low-risk assets, throwing off interest and income. That protects the solvency of that program. The latest analysis from the Comptroller's Office basically projected out that system is healthy through the 2050s. It's time for us to start using some new thinking and new approaches, using tried and true methods to get student loan borrowers out of this debt trap that they are falling into, sadly, in record numbers. So again, we're really pleased to have also Peter, who's leading the charge in the Senate, and again, has been through the battles on student loan bills in the past, and the floor is yours.
Congressman Courtney has been absolutely the leader on this since he and I first came to Congress in 2007. Unfortunately, the situation for young people is getting worse, not better. This legislation will be a lifeline to help people get started in life. When you step back, there's been enormous encouragement for young people to get a higher education for good reason. It can lead to better lives. It can lead to a stronger country. It can lead to new leaders getting a toehold in the economy. But as the cost of college has gone up and the necessity of borrowing by students, by their parents, both publicly available loans and private loans, has escalated. In Vermont, the average student debt graduating from college is $38,000. $38,000. And the job market is tough. And where a person is starting out with this financial millstone around their neck and goes into a market where rents are really, really high, where the ability to buy a car is really, really low, where the ability to get started with that kind of debt is an uphill struggle. And then where you see so many people, because they absolutely can't afford this amount of debt, are getting their credit records smashed, which is a further impediment to getting ahead. This is ground zero of the affordability crisis for a whole generation of Americans. And by the way, every single one of those Americans who went to school, did the right thing, studied, got a degree, all with the ambition of being independent and a contributor in society, they had nothing to do with the cost structure of higher education, which is too damn high. They just had to pay the tuition. And the only way they could do it is by borrowing the money. And for this Congress, in this country, to not have a better system that allows people to get the education that benefits them and is the future of our country, is shame on us in Congress. And Congressman Courtney's bill that I'm sponsoring in the Senate, bringing it down to zero interest rates, but then investing so that the Treasury is going to be basically held harmless, that is a practical, common sense way to provide some relief. And keep in mind, the students who borrowed still have to pay back on the principal. So this is not something that's going to wipe the slate clean in all the challenges of high rent, of getting a car, putting a down payment on a condo if you want to buy it. All of those are still there. But it's absolutely shameful for this Congress to not do something that is within its power to do that will help young people get a start. You know, when I got out of college, I just think about this, it's so much harder for people now. When I got out of law school, I had about $5,000 in debt, and the interest rate was like 3%. And the first apartment I got, I became a public defender, $135. I was able to pay my bills. And it wasn't, I wasn't making a lot of money, $9,000 as a public defender. Peter Welch today trying to do that couldn't do it with $38,000 in debt. And you know what? Our generation owes the younger generation fairness. Our generation owes the younger generation an opportunity to make the best of themselves, and they can't do it with this mountain of debt. And that's why this is so important to Vermonters. It's why Congressman Courtney's bill here and his leadership on this issue is absolutely so essential. So I look forward to working with Joe and his colleagues, and I look forward to working with my colleagues to try to make good on the promise of the benefits of higher education and the opportunity for the younger generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Nice job. So again, now it's my honor to introduce Tiffany Dina Lofton, who's the executive director of the U.S. Student Association, one of the largest, if not the largest, student organizations in the U.S., who obviously is at ground zero in terms of the importance of this issue. Thank you for coming, Tiffany.
Thank you so much, Congressman. The United States Student Association is the nation's oldest and largest student-run, student-led organization representing 2.7 million college students across the country who are fighting to make education a right for all. Thank you both for being champions in higher education. This bill is a huge, huge, big step for students across the country and borrowers like myself. Every day I hear from students asking the same question: how am I supposed to afford college? When tuition keeps rising, while financial aid falls further behind, and the Pell Grant is not only in a shortfall, but doesn't at all cover what it used to cover. Scholarships are limited and increasingly competitive. Campuses are cutting academic programs, student services, and resources, while the costs of housing, food, transportation, and textbooks continue to rise. Students are doing everything they are supposed to do. They're working multiple jobs, taking full course loads, and borrowing to fill the gaps. But instead of graduating with opportunity, far too many are graduating into years and often decades of student loan debt. Today, the United States Student Association is proud to stand alongside Congressman Courtney and Senator Welch in support of the Student Loan Interest Elimination Act, because education should create opportunities, not lifelong financial punishment. And I just want to share really quickly how personal this issue is for me. I graduated proudly from the University of California, Santa Cruz, believing my education would allow me to improve my community and serve others. Since graduating, I've had dedicated my career to public service. I've worked in the labor movement for the last 13 years, and I was the National Director of Youth in College at the NAACP. Today, I have the privilege of being the Executive Director of USSA. Yet despite choosing a career rooted in service, I still carry federal student loans with interest rates that were as high as 6.8%, but are now at 6%. After consolidation, every payment I've made has felt like I am chasing a finish line that keeps moving further away. And then, like many of us, life happens. Over the last 3 years, I had to become a full-time caretaker for my father and my uncle, who both experienced serious health challenges. I moved back to Los Angeles from Washington, D.C., while continuing to work full-time. Because healthcare in this country is so expensive, I spent nearly $6,000 a month out of my own personal pocket helping to pay for my father's care. When my uncle passed away in 2024 and my father in 2023, my life changed forever. I had to make impossible choices. Do I pay my student loans, or do I take out and take care for my family? I chose my family. and I would make that choice every single time. But choosing my family came with consequences. Between medical bills, funeral expenses, and the cost of settling my father's affairs, I fell behind on my student loans. My loans eventually went into default, and my credit score dropped 160 points. No one should have to choose between caring for their family and their loved ones and protecting their financial future. And my story is not unique. It's the story of millions of Americans whose lives don't fit neatly into repayment calculators. Illnesses happen. Caregiving happens. Job loss happens. Death happens. Right now, too many borrowers feel like they're renting their student loans instead of paying them off. They make payment after payment, but their balance barely moves because interest rates keep getting in the way. And this bill can change all of that. Every payment can be progress to an end. This is a real solution to a big problem. I agree with Congressmember, it is a start to a big problem. Instead of watching balances grow despite making payments, every dollar we pay would go towards reducing what we actually borrowed. That means real progress to becoming debt-free. And this bill is not just about people like me, it also ensures that future students who USSA currently represents, who take out student loans, won't begin adulthood buried under their interest. The next generation deserves a better system, the one that millennials like myself inherited. And the United States Student Association has long believed that student debt should be canceled and education should be free. Students should never have to mortgage their futures simply to earn an education. There has been a student-led movement for years, and they will continue the fight for that vision. But while we continue that fight, borrowers need relief right now. So if Congress is going to act, we need to relieve borrowers who are repaying their loans. The very least that we can do is stop charging them interest. The federal government should not profit from students trying to get an education. So on behalf of the United States Student Association, we're proud to support this legislation. Thank you again to the leadership. Your partnership in this fight means the world because students deserve more than a lifetime of interest payments. They deserve the freedom to build careers, care for their families, buy homes, start families and businesses, and give back to their communities without student debt standing in the way. Thank you so much.
I don't know if any questions from any of the press here, or we'll stick. Yes, ma'am. So that's a great question. Last year, H.R. 1, the One Big Beautiful Bill, was passed, and unfortunately, I think that took higher education and student loans in the wrong direction by capping the Stafford program arbitrarily, regardless of what type of skill or curriculum a student is pursuing. They've already been backpedaling on that issue because of what the harm to nurses and other healthcare professionals would suffer from because of H.R. 1. A few weeks ago, a number of House Republicans introduced their own bill to just sort of cut the rates to 2%. Again, there was no mechanism, though, to sort of deal with a sustainable way financially to pay for that, unlike our bill, which is using, again, I think, tried and true methods to come up with a sustainable way to get rid of interest entirely. So, to me, that shows that even though H.R. 1, was totally tone deaf, to the problems of student loan borrowers, the fact that now with an election fast approaching, and that chart from Bloomberg that shows what's happening out there, that people are starting to feel the heat, that this issue has to be addressed. So we welcome, their interest in it, but we think we have the better proposal, and we, again, as a foundation to deal with the larger issue overall. So the problem is, again, this was a bill that was done completely in isolation. There was no consultation with, people on our side of the aisle. Honestly, there was no consultation with the Education and Workforce Committee, which I'm a member of. As I said, I've been through the rodeos here, as has Peter. Again, College Cost Reduction Act, the Student Loan Certainty Act, which was signed by President Obama. Both of those bills actually had pay-fors and offsets as a way of, again, creating a multi-year benefit that was there, which at this point it is long overdue to revisit. So, again, I think they should come and support our bill, because ours is actually fiscally more responsible, which would normally be a Republican priority.
Good.
Yep. Great. All right, thanks
Thank you.
everybody. Oh, sorry, you have, sure.
With the Department of Education, or this administration rather, trying to transfer responsibility of student loans over to the Department of Treasury, I guess does this legislation respond to that potential change, or would there be any hurdles for the transfer of that responsibility?
Yeah, so the bill as drafted assumes the Department of Education is in place, which is not a wild assumption. I mean, it's still by law. They haven't repealed the 1979 law that created the Department of Education. That's there. And I think, honestly, people who are close observers of that transfer to Treasury are very concerned, because the collection methods of the Department of Treasury for people who are in default and other programs that they administer is a much harsher, rougher process that's there, where DOE at least tried to deal with ways for borrowers to get basically reestablished and out of default that's there. But having said that, the funds that we're proposing to create would actually be in the Department of Treasury, just like the Railroad Retirement Fund is. That's a Treasury Department trust fund that was created there. So, again, I still think the DOE is the better steward of these programs, but even if they are kind of reestablished, insanity prevails in terms of these spin-offs that they're doing right now, we're still going to need Treasury's involvement in terms of making this legislation operate.
That's it.
Great. All right. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
All right. Okay.
You do a good job.
I've been at this for a while.
Yeah.
Really nice to see you again.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you
you.
so
Yeah,
much.
you're
No, for
welcome.
sure.